The barn door wouldn't budge. I stood there in the suffocating Oklahoma heat, my shoulder pressed against splintered wood, pushing with everything I had. Sweat dripped down my temple. My breath came in short, frustrated bursts, and behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off his body, stood Cade Brennan, 6'3" of solid muscle, sun-kissed skin, and the kind of quiet confidence that made my chest tighten every time he looked at me. "Move over, city boy," he said, his voice low and amused. I didn't move, couldn't, because the moment I stepped aside, he'd press against me in this cramped space, and I wasn't sure I could handle that again. Not after last night, not after what almost happened. "Ryan," he said again, softer this time, "let me help." I swallowed hard and stepped aside. 3 months earlier, I'd arrived in Dust Creek, Oklahoma with nothing but a duffel bag, a bruised ego, and a desperate need to disappear. My life in Chicago had imploded spectacularly, a failed engagement, a corporate job that sucked the soul out of me, and a family that still couldn't understand why I'd walked away from everything they'd planned for my life. My uncle's ranch was supposed to be temporary, a place to clear my head, figure things out. I hadn't expected Cade Brennan. He was my uncle's ranch hand, 26 years old, born and raised in Dust Creek with calloused hands and a smile that could disarm anyone. The first time I saw him, he was shirtless, fixing a fence in the scorching afternoon sun, his muscles flexing with each swing of the hammer. His hair was dark brown, messy, and his eyes were the color of amber whiskey. "You must be the nephew," he'd said, wiping sweat from his forehead and extending his hand. "Cade." I'd shaken his hand, felt the roughness of his palm against mine, and something shifted in my chest, something I'd spent years trying to ignore. "Ryan," I'd managed to say. He'd grinned, "Welcome to hell, Ryan, hope you brought sunscreen." The first few weeks were brutal. I'd never done manual labor before, and Cade took every opportunity to remind me of it. He'd watch me struggle with bales of hay, smirking as I stumbled. He'd tease me about my soft city hands and the way I flinched every time a horse snorted too loud. But there was no cruelty in it, just playfulness, like he was testing me, seeing if I'd break. I didn't. Instead, I started waking up earlier, pushing myself harder, proving to him and maybe to myself that I could handle this life. And slowly, something changed between us. It started with the little things. The way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his hand would linger a second too long when he passed me a tool. The way he'd lean against the fence, arms crossed, watching me work with an expression I couldn't quite read. One evening, after a long day of mending fences, we sat on the porch of the main house, drinking ice-cold beer and watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air smelled like dry grass and freedom. "You're getting better," Cade said, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. I glanced at him. "At what?" "At this," he gestured vaguely at the ranch, "at not being a city boy." I laughed, "High praise coming from you." He smiled, and for a moment our eyes met, held, something flickered in his gaze, something warm and dangerous and terrifying. I looked away first. The night everything changed. It was a Friday night and my uncle had gone into town for the weekend. It was just Cade and me on the ranch. We'd finished the day's work early and Cade suggested we drive out to the lake, a spot he'd been talking about for weeks. The lake was hidden deep in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and absolute silence. The water was still, reflecting the stars like a mirror. We sat on the hood of his truck, beers in hand, shoulders almost touching. "This is my favorite place," Cade said quietly, "always has been." "I can see why," I said, "it's peaceful." He nodded, then after a long pause he said, "Can I ask you something?" My heart skipped. "Sure." "Why'd you really come here?" I hesitated. No one had asked me that directly, not even my uncle. "I needed to get away," I said finally, "from everything, my job, my family, my ex." "Your ex," he repeated, his voice careful. "Girlfriend." I froze. This was the moment I could lie, deflect, keep things safe. But I was so tired of lying. "Fiancé," I said, "his name was Marcus." The silence stretched between us. I braced myself for the worst, the awkwardness, the distance, the inevitable shift in how he'd look at me. But then Cade said, "What happened?" I exhaled slowly. He wanted me to be someone I wasn't, and I realized I'd rather be alone than pretend for the rest of my life. Cade didn't say anything for a long moment, Then he lifted his beer and said, "To being yourself." I clinked my bottle against his, and when I looked at him, something in his eyes made my breath catch. The almost. After that night, things between us grew more intense. The air felt heavier when we were together. Every accidental touch sent electricity through my skin. Every glance lingered a second too long. One afternoon, we were working in the barn, organizing feed bags. I was on a ladder and Cade was spotting me from below. "Careful," he said, "that ladder's older than my truck." "I'm fine," I said, reaching for a bag on the top shelf. And then the ladder shifted. I yelped, losing my balance, and suddenly Cade's arms were around me, catching me before I hit the ground. We stumbled backward and I ended up pressed against his chest, his hands gripping my waist. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel his heartbeat against my back, hear his breath shallow and uneven. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough. I turned my head slightly and suddenly his face was inches from mine, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, close enough that if I moved just a little our lips would touch. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Yeah," I whispered, "I'm okay." He didn't let go immediately. His hands stayed on my waist, fingers pressing gently against my sides, and in that moment I swore I saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. Then he cleared his throat and stepped back. "Good," he said, his voice strained, "be more careful." I nodded, unable to speak. The distance. After that day, Cade started pulling away. He was polite, professional even, but the warmth was gone, the teasing stopped. He'd find excuses to work alone to avoid being near me. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I told myself I'd imagined it, the tension, the almost kiss, the way he'd looked at me. Maybe I'd misread everything. Maybe he was just being friendly and I'd projected my own feelings onto him. But then one night, I overheard him talking on the phone. I'd gone to the barn to check on one of the horses, and I heard his voice coming from the other side of the building. "I can't, Jake," he was saying, his voice tight. "I told you I'm done with all that." A pause. "No, it's not like that, he's different and I can't do this anymore." Another pause, longer this time. "Because I'm scared, okay, I'm scared of what it means." My heart stopped. I backed away quietly, my mind racing. Who was Jake? What was Cade scared of? And did any of it have to do with me? The confrontation. A week later, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Cade in the barn working on the door that had been sticking for days. I walked up behind him, my heart pounding. "Cade," I said. He didn't turn around. "Yeah. Can we talk? Kind of busy right now." "Cade," my voice was firmer this time. He sighed and set down his tools, finally turning to face me. His expression was guarded. "What's going on?" I asked. "Why have you been avoiding me?" "I haven't been. Don't lie to me." His jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he'd brush me off again, but then something in his eyes cracked. "You want the truth?" he said, his voice rough. "Fine, I've been avoiding you because every time I'm near you I can't think straight. Every time you look at me I forget how to breathe. And I don't know what to do with that, Ryan. I don't know how to handle it." My breath caught. "I've spent my whole life in this town," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Everyone knows me, everyone knows my family, and I've always been careful. I've never let myself feel anything for anyone because I was terrified of what it would mean. But then you showed up, and suddenly everything I've been hiding from is right in front of me and I don't know how to deal with it." I took a step closer. "Cade." "I'm scared," he whispered. "I'm scared of losing you, I'm scared of what people will say, I'm scared of everything." I closed the distance between us, my heart hammering in my chest. "Then be scared with me," I said softly, "because I'm terrified too, but I'm done running." His eyes searched mine and I saw every emotion he'd been holding back: fear, longing, hope, desperation. And then slowly, he reached up and cupped my face in his hands. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. But then I kissed him back and something in both of us broke open. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I buried my fingers in his hair. The world fell away. There was only us, two people who'd been fighting this for too long, finally letting go. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I don't know what happens next, he said quietly. Neither do I admitted, but we'll figure it out. He smiled, a real genuine smile that made my heart swell. Yeah, he said, we will. The aftermath. The days that followed were a strange, beautiful blur. We didn't hide anymore, not from each other, at least. We'd sit together on the porch in the evenings, his hand resting on my knee. We'd work side by side in the barn, stealing glances and quiet smiles. But we both knew the real challenge was coming. My uncle returned from his trip, and Cade and I decided it was time to tell him. We sat him down one evening, and I could feel Cade's hand trembling in mine. Uncle Joe, I started, my voice steady despite my racing heart, there's something we need to tell you. My uncle looked between us, his expression unreadable. We're together, I said simply, Cade and I. The silence stretched, my uncle's gaze moved to our joined hands, then back to our faces. And then slowly he smiled. Took you too long enough, he said. I blinked, wait, you knew. He chuckled, son, I've known Cade since he was a boy, and I've watched the way he looks at you since the day you got here. I was wondering when you'd both stop being stubborn and admit it. Cade let out a breath he'd been holding. You're okay with it. My uncle's expression softened. Cade, your family, you always have been, and if you make my nephew happy, then that's all I need to know. Relief washed over me, so powerful it nearly brought tears to my eyes. The new beginning. Weeks turned into months, and slowly we found our rhythm. Cade introduced me to his close friends, the ones who mattered. Some were surprised, some weren't, but the ones who truly cared stayed, and the ones who didn't, well, we didn't need them anyway. I stayed on the ranch no longer as a temporary escape but as a choice, a life I was building with him. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Cade turned to me with that soft smile I'd grown to love. You know, he said, I never thought I'd find someone who'd make me want to stop hiding. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. I never thought I'd find a place that felt like home. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. You are home, Ryan, you always have been. Epilogue. The barn door finally unstuck on a Tuesday morning. Cade and I worked together, pushing and pulling until it gave way with a groan. We stood there, sweaty and breathless, grinning at each other like idiots. Told you we'd get it, he said. Yeah, I said, we make a good team. He pulled me into his arms, right there in the barn, and kissed me slow and deep. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, perfectly free. Bell, subscribe, like, and comment. Hit that subscribe button and smash the like if you want more emotional, slow burn LGBTQ+ love stories like this one.